Hello again, everybody. All right, so today I'm going to be telling you about how the energy yielding nutrients contribute to overall kilocalories in our food. So remember, our energy yielding nutrients were carbohydrates, fats or lipids, and proteins. So these are our three main energy yielding nutrients, and our body takes these nutrients and our cells do a process called cellular respiration. And during cellular respiration, the chemical energy in the bonds of these molecules, of our food molecules, get converted to ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And this is actually a high energy compound. And this is the compound that our body uses to do work. And when I'm talking about work, I'm talking about really all of our cellular processes. So when we are sleeping, we're respiring. When we're running a race, we're respiring. We need energy for many things, and our body breaks down carbohydrates, fats, and proteins in order to get that energy. Okay. Oops. So our objectives are to calculate the kilocalories in a food and in a diet when given grams of carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and if it's present, alcohol. Now, alcohol is not classified as a nutrient. However, it does yield energy. And we need to calculate those kilocalories if a food or a drink has alcohol in it. Our second objective is to calculate the percent of kilocalories of carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and alcohol in a specific food or in a specific diet when given grams of these four things. So that is what we are going to learn in this presentation. Let's talk about energy. So energy is the capacity to do work. And we just talked about the three major energy yielding nutrients that we ingest: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins. And I showed you that our body breaks these down in order to convert the energy in the bonds to chemical energy that our body can use, which is in the form of ATP. So energy is measured in a really small unit called a calorie. And you can see on the slide, I have calorie in quotation marks. So notice that this calorie has a small c. So in nutrition, energy is actually measured in kilocalories, which is 1,000 times larger than a calorie. So a kilocalorie can also be written as a calorie with a capital C or a K-calorie. And so when you see a food label, so say there's a candy bar, and that candy bar has 300 calories, what that actually is a kilocalorie. So it says calorie, and you'll see it with a capital C. And so that candy bar, you know, doesn't have 300,000 calories. It has 300,000 calories with a lowercase c. But on the nutrition label, you'll see that calories should have a capital C because it's really 300 kilocalories. Now let's take an apple as an example. So we're talking about calories in food. It's not like these calories are actually, floating around in the food. What it means is that that food releases that amount of kilocalories of energy in our body. So for example, an apple releases about 100 kilocalories or 100,000 calories with a small c in the human body. Now I keep talking about this process called cellular respiration, this process that our body uses to convert the energy in carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, our three major energy yielding nutrients, to a form of usable energy that our bodies can actually use. And so what happens is in this process of cellular respiration, our cells break down these three energy yielding nutrients to yield water, carbon dioxide, which we breathe out, and energy, ATP. So this is the energy that our body uses. So when these three energy yielding nutrients get metabolized in the body, they yield energy, and this energy is in the form of calories. So we know that 1 gram of carbohydrates yields 4 kilocalories. 1 gram of protein can yield 4 kilocalories. So proteins and carbohydrates have that same value. 1 gram yields 4 kilocalories. A gram of fat actually yields a lot more, so more than double, 9 kilocalories. A gram of alcohol, if it's present in a food or drink, can yield 7 kilocalories per gram. So when we're thinking about the amount of calories that can be yielded from a particular food, I want you to know these numbers. And we're going to look at some problems. So we're going to look at some problems and I'll give you some examples. But basically, two calculations that we'll use really often in nutrition are as follows. So we're going to want to be able to calculate the total number of kilocalories from grams of carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and any alcohol that's present in our food or drink. So that's a really important calculation. And the second important calculation is to be able to calculate the percent of kilocalories of carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and alcohols in a specific food. So the total number of kilocalories from these four things and the percent of kilocalories from these four things. So this is a pretty simple thing to do. It's really just multiplication, and we'll check out a few examples. So let's take a look at this first example. So I want us to calculate the total kilocalories that are released from 8 ounces of almond-crusted rainbow trout, which, if you look it up, it contains 4.4 grams of carbohydrates, 16.9 grams of fat or lipids, 20.5 grams of protein. So just by knowing these three values, we can actually calculate those two things that I told you about in the last slide. So let's take a look at how we do that. So if we want to calculate the total kilocalories in almond-crusted rainbow trout from carbohydrates, what we do is we multiply that. So here we can see I told you there were 4.4 grams of carbohydrates. We take this and we multiply it by 4. So we see that this yields 17.6 kilocalories. So we have 17.6 kilocalories from carbohydrates. I told you that there's 16.9 grams of fat in this almond-crusted rainbow trout. Remember I told you that number for fats is 9, so fats yield 9 kilocalories per gram. So we multiply the 16.9 times 9 and we get 152.1. And then here you can see for proteins, there was 20.5 grams of protein in this meal, and you can see we're multiplying that by 4 to get 82 calories. So if you add these up, add up all the calories from carbohydrates, your fats, and your protein, you get 251.7 total kilocalories. And what we would do is we'd probably just round this up to 252. So if you see this on a quiz or an exam, the answer would likely be written as 252 kilocalories. All right. Okay, so we just calculated in our last slide the number of kilocalories from each of our energy yielding nutrients. So here in this example, I'm going to show you how you calculate the percent of kilocalories from carbohydrates, fats, and proteins in, our example is going to be 1 bowl of Panera chicken and wild rice soup. So if you look this up, you can find out that the Panera chicken and wild rice soup has 27 grams of carbohydrates, 16 grams of fat, and 10 grams of protein. So we're going to do exactly what we did in that last example, because we first need to calculate the total number of kilocalories from each of these things. So 27 grams of carbohydrates times 4 equals 108. I told you there were 16 grams of fat in this meal. We multiply fats by 9. We get 144 kilocalories of fat, and then 10 grams of protein. And so we multiply that by 4, and we get 40 kilocalories. So total, we get 292 kilocalories. Now, if we want to do that second equation, where we take the kilocalories and we calculate percent kilocalories, what we do is we take these numbers up here. So we know we have 108 kilocalories from carbohydrates, and we divide that by the total number of kilocalories, which is 292. So what percentage of our kilocalories come from carbohydrates? 0.37, we just multiply that by 100 to get a percentage, and you can see that 37% of our calories come from carbohydrates. Let's look at the fat. So we calculated up here that there were 144 kilocalories from fat. Again, we divide that by the total kilocalories, 292, and we get 0.49, which we multiply by 100 to get a percentage, and we see that almost half of our calories in this meal come from fat, so 49%. And then we do the same thing with protein. So 40 kilocalories of protein, we divide that by total kilocalories, and we get 14% of our kilocalories coming from protein. So 14% plus 49 plus 37 equal 100. And when you do these examples, they should always add up to 100. So there's an example of how to calculate both the kilocalories that come from carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, as well as the percent kilocalories from each of those three energy yielding nutrients. All right, so I hope those were clear examples. You will need to do this for the first exam. This is something that's really important in the field of nutrition, and so I really want you to be able to do this. So you have a quiz that you're going to do, which has you calculating the number of kilocalories from carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and alcohol, and then the percent kilocalories from each of these four things. Alcohol may or may not be present. And so in order to practice this, you can see in this week's activities or learning activities, you can see that I've posted a worksheet for you to do and for you to practice with. So I'd recommend doing this worksheet. If you need to look at the key, I did post a key as well. If you need to look at the key for the first one, go ahead and look at that so you can remember how to do this. But I really encourage you to go ahead and do all the examples without the key, as many as you can, and then go back and check your answers so that you know how to do this. Your book has some examples, and if you need any help, you always have me. So good luck with these calculations and good luck on the quiz.